Imagine harnessing your interest in electronics and putting it to work on aircraft, big or small. At Spartan College.
Hey networkers, welcome to Network 1901 on YouTube, and welcome especially to our live show. If you didn't notice, this is spoiler talk. We are talking spoilers on Endgame. So if you haven't seen the film and you don't want it to be spoiled, then you're not going to want to watch this live stream this week. So I'm sorry for excluding you if you didn't see it and you don't want to watch this, but welcome for everyone who does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And actually, so Radar brings up a good point. So our friends from the Story Geeks are also doing an in-game talk at 8:30 Pacific, 9:30 Mountain, 10:30 Central, 11:30 Eastern. So if you're interested in hearing from them, they're good guys. They're huge, like way, way, way more into like superhero movies than we are.
Yeah.
So go check them out
Yeah,
if you'd like to.
Daryl
But
actually is a long time comic book fan, so he's known these stories a lot longer than I have. Even though I'm an MCU fan. But let's just like jump right into it. So just last and final warning. Spoiler talk on Endgame. If you don't
this
want
is all. This
spoilers,
is spoilers.
the entire thing is just spoilers. Yeah, just keep up the spoiler talk graphic. We
Okay.
might as well, just in
Yeah.
case anyone comes new. Okay, so first and foremost, I just want to quickly recap what happens in this film. Is that all right?
Yep.
All right. So just
This is quickly recap
yeah,
what happened in this film.
this epic. So we've had 22 films over the last decade or so. This is like everything from these last 22 films has led up to this moment, and I would
You're not gonna recap all 22 films,
no
right?
no no I'm just recapping Endgame. But like I just want you all to realize like how crazy that is. So in the last film, in Infinity War, basically it ends by Thanos, the bad guy, snapping his fingers, and half of everybody in the galaxy just dissolves into nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
So at the beginning of Endgame, we basically learn that Thanos has gone off to kind of like live out the rest of his life. And a few of the Avengers go and they find him and they learn that he's destroyed the stones. So there's no more stones. There's no hope. This is right after the snap and everything. Yeah, the snap. Um, but we learn that there's basically no way to reverse what he's done because the
No.
stones would have been the only way. And then Thor just kills Thanos because he's so mad. So now fast forward to 5 years later, and we see that
It's not only 5 years later, it's like 5 years
yes.
later.
So not only is everybody still dealing with what happened from Thanos, but on Earth, life isn't the paradise that Thanos had described he thought it would be after the snap.
Right.
He describes that like everyone's gonna be happy, everyone's gonna thank him for what he did, but actually everybody's still suffering. Everyone's suffering from PTSD. And everyone still just wishes this never happened. Um, Tony Stark realizes he can figure out how to go back in time after Ant-Man comes back and explains time travel to him in the quantum realm and everything. And he says that as long as we don't change what's happened in the last 5 years, if we can go back, get the Infinity Stones, snap our fingers, bring everyone back,
Right.
and not change anything that's happened, because now people have moved on a little bit. Like Tony Stark now has a daughter and everything.
You're not changing the past, really, just changing the future.
Right.
The only problem that I see with this, and this is completely selfish on Tony Stark's part, right? Because he has like this wonderful family, but like, what about those people that had moved on from their relationships or whatever and started like dating,
Yeah.
but like their wives and children had all been dusted and they like were in new relationships and whatnot.
Man, I didn't even think of
A
that.
lot of explaining to do.
Yeah.
On that,
So now we go on to what Ant-Man likes to call the time heist.
It's the best.
So they go back in time to get the stones to take to the present. And during all of this, because they actually have to go into space, and Nebula is part of this.
Mm-hmm.
When Nebula goes back in time, there's I'm gonna say present version of Nebula. That's the 5 years later person, present time. But then there's still past Nebula who's existing in this time period,
Mm-hmm.
and her memories somehow get jumbled with the past Nebula memories. There's like some malfunction, and Thanos sees that something fishy is up. He kind of just learns that his plan to get all the Infinity Stones was successful, and now the Avengers, who he didn't know who the Avengers were at the time in the past, but he knows that they're getting the time stones or
Right.
the Infinity Stones, and he figures, well, my plan worked once before, it can work again, but this time I don't even have to go collect all the stones. I just have to find these guys after they collect all the stones. So he basically has his past Gamora and past Nebula work to get him to come to the present time to get the stones.
Yeah, they used the portal.
But we're not quite there yet. So we're everyone's still like collecting all the time stones and everything. Well, I guess we can be there now. So eventually they get all the time stones. I keep saying time stones. They get
Infinity
all
Stones.
the Infinity Stones
From back in time.
From back in time. Now we're back in the present. Hulk has a gauntlet. He has all the stones on it, and he snaps and he brings everyone back.
Yeah, which was interesting because is like they didn't really explain the rules of the Infinity Gauntlet, and people who are comic readers probably knew it, but like I thought the rules of the Infinity Gauntlet were, excuse me, you snap and you lose half the population. Now I guess it is you snap and whatever you want
Yeah,
to
it's
happen
like your will.
happens.
Right.
But like that was just my overall impression, and so when they started to say, oh, you can do all these other things, it was like, oh, okay, I'll go with this.
Right.
But there's a lot of moments in this movie where you're like, that's pretty far fetched, but I like it, so I'm gonna run with it.
Well, the Infinity Stones, basically the story behind the Infinity Stones is that when the universe was created, at that moment these stones were also created. So they hold like all the power of like the creator, which would be like all the power in the world or in the universe.
Right.
Period. So I would just assume like if you have all the Infinity Stones, you are like as powerful as like everything, like as the universe. So you can just do whatever you want.
Right.
Um
Right.
so okay, so now we're in present time. Hulk has snapped. He's gotten all burnt up, just like we saw Thanos got all burnt up from the power of the stones. And like it really damages you. That's why the Hulk does it. Because he can handle it. And then now Thanos is here at the same exact moment. He's come with his army to now get all of the Infinity Stones. And we see in this moment that basically the way we realize that all of the Avengers and all of the heroes are back is Captain America hears someone say, "On your left."
Right.
And it's Falcon. And everyone in the theater cheers.
Or cries for
Or
like the fifth time in
yeah.
this movie.
So you look and you see all these portals have opened. All of the heroes from all these different places have come through these portals, and they are here to fight Thanos once again. Past Thanos, because present Thanos is dead. Thanos ends up getting the gauntlet with all the Infinity Stones, and he goes to snap, and he says, "I am inevitable." And that was my impression. I don't know why it sounded like that. But when we see him go to snap, we see that the gauntlet doesn't
have
have the
stones.
stones on it. And then Iron Man goes like this, and he has all the stones in his Iron Man suit, and he snaps, and all of Thanos' army dissolves. Which I assume in that instance, like Gamora also dissolves.
But we don't know. We don't know if she's around or
Yeah,
not.
they don't show her.
No.
And then Carol Danvers also at one point destroys their whole ship. I think like right before this happens. But the thing is that Tony is just a man, even though he has the Iron Man suit on. And this ultimately leads to his demise. And everybody cried so much. But when after Thanos is like, "I am inevitable," Tony Stark is like, "I am Iron Man." And then everyone cheers in the theater.
Wow.
So anyway.
Wow, you got real excited for that.
So after this happens, big climax of the movie. Now we just got to wrap everything up at the end. They already agreed that they were going to return all of the Infinity Stones back to the exact moment in the past where they had taken them from, because they don't want to affect the past. Those storylines still need to continue on as normal. So Captain America goes to go back in time, return all the stones, and then we see he doesn't come back to the present moment, and he gets his little happy ending by basically staying in the past and living out his life with Peggy Carter. And that's
how it ends.
That's where the end game ends. So now let's just get into just like overall thoughts on the film.
Yeah. Overall, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
I would like you to go first, please.
So everyone kept on saying like, I don't know how they're gonna make this work, and so many people said the phrase "stick the landing." They stuck the landing. Like, this is great, and like all I could say like coming out of this was like how satisfying it was, and like yes, there were characters that died. There were different characters, and we're gonna go through some of these characters, at least like the main 6 Avengers, mostly, and kind of their arcs throughout this whole thing. But it was like satisfying. It was extremely funny. There was great action. You not really care for much action. You rather like the character development, which this was like complete character development. And then there was some tears. The definitely the end got me. The end more than like the middle and other certain parts. That I heard sniffles though. I heard a lot of sniffles.
Yeah. So for me, like, okay, I have to be honest. after Infinity War, I was kind of like, what is like, where's this going? Like, what is? First of all, I knew no, like, go back to like my old video with the predictions on what was gonna happen in Endgame. I wasn't like 100% right, but I was pretty right that like nobody in the snap who actually died was like dead for good.
Right.
Except like I thought maybe Gamora, Loki, like people who weren't really dead in the snap, were still going to be dead. So, but basically, like I was kind of like losing faith in Marvel for a little bit. I was like, like I'm kind of bored with these characters. I'm bored with, um, it's just kind of like the same old, and it wasn't really like new stuff being interesting. And then like, Captain Marvel came out, and I liked the film. I love the character, but it was like there's so many things I felt like they missed in that film. Same thing with like Ant-Man and the Wasp. Loved the film. Felt like maybe it didn't really fit in the spot where it went, except for the fact that it was describing the quantum realm a little bit better.
I actually liked where it was. I know a lot of people thought it was insignificant because of like what had just happened,
Right.
and then you got this like little film that happened in the Bay Area.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so I agree with you that like Infinity War, a lot of people think it's their favorite. It's not my favorite. I think it's real heavy on action,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's split up everywhere. There's just too many characters to follow. It's difficult,
Yeah.
and this kind of refocuses everything.
Right. The pacing on Infinity War was really tough for me. And watching it again pretty recently, I feel like I understood it a little more, and I liked it a little more. I think it's one of those films that you have to watch a couple of times. But like that, the thing is that everything in Infinity War is happening in a day. So it's like the pacing is like boom, boom. I don't want to snap because that's like, but like it's like boom, 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 boom. And it's like, give me a second, But Endgame, I think,
It breathes a little more.
yes. And I think one of the things that I love about Marvel so much, and if you listen to my issue number 1 podcast series, or if you're watching the Marvel 101 series here on our YouTube page, the thing that I really love about Marvel, about the MCU anyway, I love this about the comics too, but I'm just not a huge comics person, so I don't want to like speak to the comics too much.
Mm-hmm.
Is the character development, is the personalities, is the human part of these characters. And I think a lot of the story arcs in the ways that they kind of wrapped up stories in Marvel Endgame, it just was like so perfect to that. It wasn't the same, it's not the same Captain America that you get from the beginning. It's not the same
Oh no, none of
Iron
them
Man.
are. Yeah.
And let's just like get right into that.
Into
So
the characters.
yeah, so let's first talk about Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Why don't you go first?
So I remember going to the theater with my dad watching Iron Man, and I think that's like the only Marvel film that my dad ever watched. Not that he doesn't care for it, but like he's just like not. He watches movies that he wants to watch, but he doesn't like seek out a 22 film epic.
Right.
I don't know, so it's weird. But like, I remember going to the theater, seeing Iron Man, and being like, "Wow, this is a pretty neat movie." I really liked Robert Downey Jr. anyway from the movie Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which was I think the movie he did just previous to Iron Man, and I liked him in other stuff too. But Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was like such a good film, and then I was really excited because they brought in Shane Black to do Iron Man 3, to direct that film, and he directed Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and it just made him more and more snarky. And then in Civil War, they took snarky Tony Stark and made him a little more humble, a little more wanting kind of just me time, not wanting to be the playboy billionaire millionaire that he was. And we see that in this film. We see that he would rather just live in a cabin in the woods with his wife and his daughter and just not do anything. And then when he's reminded of who he is and of the things that he's able to do, he can't help but jump back in. But he's so conflicted in that I want both in life. And then you see at the end this like extremely sweet moment that made me cry. It's like when I started crying was when you get Pepper and he's like on his deathbed, he's like moments from dying, and you get Pepper that just says like, "We'll be okay. You can rest now."
Oh.
And it was like
Oh.
that's what you would say to him. Oh,
Oh.
and like that was hardcore.
Yeah. Well, his whole thing has always kind of been the story of like making amends, right? So like his story from Iron Man 1 starts off as he's this like weapons dealer who doesn't really care about anyone but himself. Um I mean, he doesn't really have he's lived a sheltered life, so maybe it's not really his fault, but like he just he doesn't care about anyone but himself until he realizes the scope of the impact that his actions have on the world.
Yeah.
And so his whole story from like a decade ago until now is him trying to make up for that.
And also like he wanted to step out of his father's shadows. He respected his father a lot, but he also wanted to be different than his father, and he wanted to set his own course in life. And like again, you're able to have this great Back to the Future moment where like he meets his dad, and they have this like conversation. And of course, neither of them know. Well, his dad doesn't know who he is, and there's this really great point in the movie. They're talking about having children, and he hasn't like given any personal information about himself,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's almost like he's telling his dad, he just blurts it out. He's like, "I have a daughter," and it's like he wants to tell his dad that he's a grandfather so much,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants to be like, I'm raising a kid in a different way than you were, but I hope you'd be proud of the way I'm raising
Right.
her. Like he wishes that his dad was so proud of him, but that he forged his own way in life instead of um instead of following in his footsteps, which he is in movie one, which he is in Iron Man, and then he forges his own way by the end of that film. And then by this point in time, he's like a completely different person um, than any Stark before him. He just wants to live in the woods and with Pepper and their daughter Morgan.
Right. So he's like, I mean, he basically like gives his dad advice on how to raise him because you find out that like his dad is about to have him. Like he's
Right.
just found out that his wife is pregnant. So you get that, and but then you also get this Tony kind of gets this confirmation that his dad is just trying his best. Even though they had like a rocky relationship and his dad was like really harsh on him,
Right.
he gets this moment of like, my dad was just a human, and like any mistakes he may have made when he was like raising me, like he's just human and he loved me, and that's all he really cares about is his love for me.
In that same scene too, we get Jarvis is like the driver,
Yeah.
and so you get to see, and it's the same voice, which is cool.
Yeah. So basically like Tony's whole story has this whole time has been this like redemption story about like making amends or like making up for what you've done, and
Yeah.
really like the payoff at the end is that he gets to save everybody.
And
So
sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay, just
And
go.
Tony Stark was never my favorite character,
Hmm.
but like his entire arc is so masterclass like storytelling that like I couldn't help but cry at the funeral scene, even though like to me Tony Stark was like, I take him or leave him. He's not like that important to me, and like he is important to these characters, but like he's not like a character that I'm like I need Iron Man in my life. And at the end of this, I was just like, I need Iron Man in my life. He's so
Yeah,
good.
well, you could argue that maybe like the whole Avengers story is his story.
It kind of is, yeah. And I think it's also Cap's story. It's both, and those are the two biggest characters of this film.
Right. So his story kind of gets wrapped up. Pepper Potts is now wearing an Iron Man suit. So we assume that she is going to be like the new Iron Man,
Maybe.
possibly. Um
And
I don't know if she's gonna want to be in more films, so
Right. In the comics, she does play a character called Rescue. Um, very different from like what the Iron Man suit. Like she doesn't have weapons or anything. She like literally just rescues people.
Hmm.
But um, Pepper was able to save Tony in Iron Man 3. And so she did have kind of like a play on this, but I don't know if I see her going much further unless they do bring in like an all female, like A Force Avengers type of thing. That
That
is possible.
that was actually like a kind of cool scene too, where like all the girls get together in one part and they're like, "We got your back."
Yeah, and I think so. I've seen a lot of people actually be like, "I think this one scene was dumb," and I'm pretty sure everybody was thinking that it was the scene where all the girls are there, and I'm not 100% sure that people understand that like if that didn't like get you excited, it's because it wasn't like your scene. Like there are different characters for different people.
Right.
This like female empowerment idea, and like yeah, it is far fetched that like all the girls were
Just happen
somehow
to
just
yeah.
happened to be clumped right here.
It's the girl power
But
signal. Don't you not
yeah,
know about
but
that?
it's also pretty far fetched in Infinity War when like suddenly all the Wakandans are losing, and then out of nowhere, beaming from space is Thor.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
everything is far fetched. Everything is on the
Right.
table. Like, are you like, oh, how did all the girls get over here, and why were they like, oh, we'll be together as a team? It's just like all of this is stupid
Yeah.
and far fetched. Like it is a dumb superhero
Yeah.
movie, but like in the best, like it's dumb superhero movie in the best way possible.
Right. Well, I mean, like this movie gave everybody their moment, so I think in this way it was a way to give like some of those female characters their moment at the same time.
Right.
But okay, so Iron Man's story wraps up with, now we have Pepper Potts in this suit. We don't know if she's gonna go any farther. But we still have War Machine. We still have Spider-Man. So I assume these two are going to be kind of carrying on Tony Stark's legacy and his memory.
I'm sure, and like I don't think War Machine's going anywhere.
Right.
So
And we still have Bruce Banner, who is super smart, so maybe he'll take over the lab. Or right, we have Hank
yeah,
Pym's back, so
yeah, they don't have the
he
money, but we do have a lot of scientists.
right. But let's move on. Next character, Cap,
Yeah,
Captain America.
and after Captain America, we'll talk. We'll like answer some of the stuff that people have said in the chat. So
Okay.
we'll take like some breaks throughout this thing so that like we can answer people's thoughts. So if you have any thoughts or you want to bring up a question or whatever, like send it in and we'll get to it. And I'll try and like scroll through the chat um, at that point. But Captain America, another character who we knew was probably going to go. Chris Evans has said for a while that like he doesn't want to play Captain America forever. That this might be his last film. And I was wondering how they were going to treat him. Like everybody was pretty sure they're like, well, they'll just kill him. They'll just kill him, and they didn't, which was surprising. It was interesting, and I'm glad that they didn't because it would be easy to be like, we're just going to kill off these characters.
Yeah.
They gave him this nice, sweet ending, and it's so cool to see again his arc and like how he this whole time all he wanted was kind of a normal life. He got the super soldier serum, became Captain America, and kind of reluctantly did it, but did it because he felt like he was the answer for the good guy. You
Mm-hmm.
know, he was standing up for everybody that's good, and so much so that this movie pays off the idea that they brought up in Ultron, which is like he almost picks up Thor's hammer, and barely can, and a lot of people have said this. So I always thought that he couldn't pick up the hammer, and a couple of people have said two things. He couldn't pick up the hammer because he lied to Tony Stark about Bucky killing his parents. And when he finally fessed up to it, he became finally noble. He had no lies. He had nothing like that. The other thing that people say is, which I kind of agree with, and I think is an interesting note, is that he actually could have picked up the hammer, but he saw that everybody was trying so hard and he wanted to fit in and he wanted people to just kind of like him that he didn't pick up the hammer like when he almost did.
I also wonder. I like that a lot, and that's the first time that thought has even crossed my mind. I like that. I also it could also be a similar situation, except it wasn't that he wasn't it, it wasn't that he wanted to fit in, but maybe like um maybe he doubted himself. You know, like maybe he was like about to pick it up and then he like had self-doubt and then it just like stopped. Like you have to like believe in your own worthiness to
Yeah,
be able to wield it too. Maybe. I don't know.
maybe.
But he's another character like Tony Stark whose story arc has kind of um always had this like overshadowing feeling of pain because he's experienced loss and he's dedicated his whole life to like saving America, right? Like
Yeah,
or to saving the world or whatever. He's never really like done stuff for himself. He's always had this duty to serve others.
right.
So even in his past, he met Peggy Carter, um, and that's like the one time like he was gonna do something for himself, and he doesn't have her anymore. He lost her. Um, so it's kind of like beautiful that he ends up getting to have her back in the end,
No,
right?
yeah,
Like
no, it is,
he
and
finally gets something for himself.
he did kiss her like granddaughter, great granddaughter. Mm, I believe that happened. So he's got it.
We just
Whatever.
don't talk
We
about
don't talk about that. But I do think that the overall arc of Cap and where he ends and how the whole movie ends. The whole movie ends with Steve Rogers dancing with Peggy Carter. I think that that is like a pretty crazy note to end on. Like that is a very distinct note to end on. You know what? Like they could have ended on the funeral scene. They
hmm
could have done all the Steve Rogers stuff and then moved to the funeral, and that would have felt more conclusive. But there's just something so touching and intimate and sweet about Steve and Peggy just like dancing. And that's something that like Marvel has done so well throughout all of these films. They create intimate moments in what should be epic stories. This battle I felt was bigger than the one in Wakanda in Infinity War, but it also felt easier to follow and it felt more intimate. We don't get to see every character fighting, and we get those big kind of splash page shots where like you do see people, but there's a lot of like little intimate moments and little intimate battles that you just kind of like get clued in on, and you stick with them for a while. But like in the back, you just see like Ant-Man like his giant foot like cross the
yeah.
screen.
Oh yeah, when Ant-Man like is when like who is it? Rocket um who's like trapped. It's like Rocket, Bruce Banner, and is it Nebula? No. There's like three.
Down below,
Yeah, they're like trapped.
Rhodey. It's
Yeah,
it's War Machine.
so he and then like Ant-Man's like swimming towards him and he's like, I'm coming. I was like,
What's
what's
he
he
gonna do?
gonna do? And then it's like he just is like giant man.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah.
That's the great thing is they've not overused the Giant Man thing,
hmm
so that it still is a surprise every time that they do it.
Right.
They've done it 3 times now.
But when he was
Um,
like running, when everyone's like running towards Thanos and his army, I was like, don't step on anybody.
I know.
But let's go to the chat.
Okay, let's go. So everybody said hi at the beginning of this. I'm gonna go like backwards in time, so I'm sorry if we do this. But
Yeah.
Jennifer said I bawled at the Captain America part. I was like, he got his girl. OMG, so beautiful. Um, and it's interesting because like he had nothing, and Tony had everything at the beginning of this movie, and at the end of it, it seems like Cap gets everything he wants, and Tony has to die. So they rollovers. But Cap has had not gotten anything he wanted since World War II, so he deserves a little something. And like that moment when he's kind of spying on her when they like go to the 70s and he doesn't say anything
Yeah.
and whatnot. I didn't know if that was gonna go anywhere, and I didn't think it was gonna go anywhere. And
No,
I'm
I
glad they
didn't. I thought they were just showing it to be like, here, cry again.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'll cry again.
All about talking about like picking up Thor's hammer, that it also would have cheapened Thor had he picked it up in Ultron. It would have not made Thor as unique.
Hmm.
And I think what's interesting, and we'll talk about Thor in a minute, but like what's interesting about that moment, you're right in that if Cap could have wielded um, the hammer and he could have, wielded whatever weapon, the only thing that separates him is that I guess like Thor can fly.
But doesn't like he use the hammer to fly?
Yeah. So I guess Cap could have flown with the hammer. So there's that. Um, Elma also said Peter, Ned, MJ, Flash, all dusted. Far From Home set before the snap. Far From Home's trailer misleading us, and it's just Peter and Ned. I actually think so. The reason why Phase 3 ends with Spider-Man Far From Home and not this film is because I think they'll explain the because Spider-Man is he's the neighborhood Spider-Man, right? So it's much more like this is intimate as well. When this movie couldn't be that intimate and explain at the very end like how people feel about being gone for 5 years versus the people who have still been around for 5 years and like
Right.
what the dynamics of that is. What like do you still are you still in the same grade? Do you still have your same job that you go back to? Like I said
Right.
before,
Because everybody else has aged 5 years and you haven't.
like if you had moved on from a relationship and then all of a sudden 5 years later like the person that you were in love with is back, what is that dynamic? So I think that Spider-Man Far From Home will probably play a little bit on that.
Yeah.
And then
I hope they do because I think that would be a really interesting story to tell. Like, where have you seen a story like that be told before,
right,
right?
and then now you have a reason to have villains be really angry too, like you guys, like the Avengers ruined my life because they didn't save the galaxy. You killed my daughter or my wife or what, so like there's a reason for villains to be even more upset at this point. Um our dogs, they're bad. And Jesse said, I would have liked if Lady Death had a role. Um, Thanos still doesn't compare to his comic arc. Did you get caught that they increased Wanda's powers again, subtly setting up House of M? And so, okay, yes. So obviously we've kind of hit this big moment with the Infinity War slash Endgame two-parter that we now need to probably build towards the next big thing. Maybe not just Phase 4, but like Phase 5, Phase 6. And House of M is perfect because you've slowly increased Wanda's powers, and you see Scarlet Witch kind of learning who she is, growing up, um, getting hurt more, becoming actually more like the Phoenix character. Um, and in doing that, you could definitely go towards that House of M. You could, in that way, introduce the X-Men, the Fantastic Four characters. There's a lot that you can do with that. And now that Disney has the rights to all of those, and they have the TV shows, especially with the WandaVision TV show, they can definitely start to explore some of that if they decide to go that route.
Yeah.
So anything is possible there.
House of M is also like, I feel like a lot of people, because I watch like a lot of people talking about Marvel and stuff, and like everyone loves House of M, so I could
Yeah.
totally see them being like, "You love it? Here it is."
Yeah. Let's move. We're gonna come back to the chat here in a bit. Let's move on to some of
Okay.
these other characters, and then talk about the future of Marvel because I do want to talk about Phase 4, the Disney Plus shows, Doctor Strange 2, Guardians 3, some of these other films.
Okay. So let's go on to Hawkeye and Black Widow.
Yeah, because they kind of go hand in hand. Obviously, if you're here, you've probably seen the movie at this point, so you know that they both go searching for the Soul Stone. And when you know that both are going to search for the Soul Stone,
Oh yeah, what's
one
the
of
first?
them,
Yeah.
one of them has to go. So let's start with Black Widow, with Scarlett Johansson. So at the beginning of this movie, she is completely crushed. And rightfully so, because her whole family is the
Yeah.
Avengers.
And I love the representation of how you can see she's kind of like her hair in Infinity War and at the beginning of this film is that blonde short,
Shortcut.
kind of like how long my hair is. And now it's had 5 years of growth, except she still has the blonde on the bottom. She never bothered to like chop it off or like dye it or anything like that. Like that I not that like a woman letting themselves go is like representative of so like but like for her it's kind of like showing you like she hasn't thought about anything else except for the snap
She
for 5 years.
she has through the whole 22 films, however many times that she appeared, she has changed her look many times. She's always worn makeup. Black Widow is, and like it's very rare in Hollywood anyway that you have a female character that doesn't have makeup on.
Yep.
But like
I mean even the men
even the men wear makeup.
yeah.
But like the fact that she's changed her hair so many times means that she does care about her outward appearance.
Mm.
And for that to be a moment that you noticed
I
had to be
think
deliberate.
yeah, I love like that kind of storytelling where it's like they don't tell you, but it's just like a it's something that you can like notice yourself, you know?
Right. And then with Hawkeye, you have someone who, if she stopped caring, he cares so much. So much so that he becomes this like vigilante justice. And he goes from Hawkeye to Ronin. Even though they didn't call him Ronin, comic book fans know him as Ronin. And I hope that, I mean, I know we're gonna get an eventual Hawkeye series, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But like, I hope we get this Ronin character continuing.
Why don't you keep going? Sorry.
And
Come on now.
the fight that they have for the Soul Stone kept me going. And I don't know about you guys, but it kept me going the entire time. I was like wondering what the heck was gonna happen because they kept on tripping each other up. They were like kind of like half fighting each other. I did not know who was gonna die. And when Clint, Hawkeye, takes that jump off the ledge, I was like, it's Hawkeye. Hawkeye's gone. Hawkeye's gone. And then it's not Hawkeye, and they trick you out.
Yeah.
And then he lets her go, and like they're just like staring at each other. And then Clint is like somehow in this like weird little pond. It's like the soul. He got the soul stone, and then he like shifted spaces, and he's just like crying in the water. And like when they all go back from the time heist, and they're standing on the portal, and he's just like falls to his knees, and he can't even say that she died.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my god, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah, and I actually like I really loved the very beginning of the film where they show Hawkeye lose his family because like the when you see the snap in Infinity War, you see like a little bit of it happening in New York and like um with Nick Fury and he's like oh what's going on, you know? But you kind of like have this feeling like he knows that it's Thanos. Like he knows or he knows like something's going on with like the aliens attacking Earth and that he needs to call Captain Marvel, right? Like
Yeah.
he knows something's up. With Hawkeye, you get this moment where it's like he has no idea what's happening. In that kind of perspective, I mean maybe he like eventually assumes but like that perspective of the snap I think was a really interesting perspective to show because like imagine like you're just like some person like maybe not Hawkeye but like just some random family
Right.
and you're just sitting at dinner
Yeah.
and then just your family just like isn't there anymore.
Again, it's those like intimate moments that you
Right.
have that like are I'm excited to hopefully expand upon in Far From Home.
Right.
And then like when you talk about Hawkeye training his daughter, and then you also get so many other children in this film. You get like the kid from Iron Man 3, who everybody in the theater, and we were like,
yeah.
why is this kid at the
Yeah,
funeral?
like when the
And
I
then
was like
then you have his daughter Morgan.
Yeah.
You could inevitably, because there is also a young Avengers. Um, you have Ant-Man's daughter. So you have all these like kids. So you could have a new Avengers. You could have the A Force, which is like the female Avengers, and you could have young Avengers, and you could have like all together. You could have them separately. You could have them on Disney Plus shows. There's a lot of possibilities with that.
Mm-hmm. But let's move on to the Hulk.
So I have a ton to say about the Hulk. I like the Hulk, but he's never been my favorite character. I really like Mark Ruffalo. I think he's a great actor and he's charming, super charming. And he makes the Hulk more and more charming each time. Obviously, they put them together, so the Hulk can be more charming.
Yeah, the way they did that like CG on him, it was perfect. Like every time the Hulk did like a little mannerism that was like super Mark Ruffalo, and it just like worked so well for like the big green CG thing. Like it was like, oh, how do you do that? How do you like capture just those like little like
Yeah,
intricacies of
I'd actually like to know if how much of him was on set. Because like, did they just like have him do all the lines and do everything, and then like CG over him, or did they like not even have him on set? And because it seems different than the way that they do Groot or Rocket Raccoon. It felt like, I mean, and they do a good job as far as like talking to a CG raccoon and that raccoon talking back to you. But like the way that they have conversations with the Hulk, it just seems like they've known this guy for so long, and it seems so natural and flowing in the conversation that it just feels like Mark Ruffalo had to have been on set.
yeah. What I do really like about the character in this film is, um, we talk about Tony and we talk about Captain America and how their themes kind of throughout the whole course of the last decade of films has been really like this underlying pain. Um, Tony for like what his creations have done, what his business has done. Captain America for like his own personal wishes not being able to be fulfilled and always having this duty to others. With the Hulk, it's really like Bruce Banner's pain is really like the fact that he is the Hulk. Um,
Yeah.
he's uh he's depressed and he's really angry. I mean, he's like his secret is that he's always angry. And the reason he's angry is because he's the Hulk. So it's really interesting that the way that they gave his character kind of like a redemption story is by simply having him accept the fact that he's the Hulk.
And
Like
merge them.
that's literally, yeah, like literally acceptance is his character's arc.
Which you see a bit of in like Thor Ragnarok, right? You get a bit of that, but then you get this conflicting again with in Infinity War.
Yeah. Like there's always like this battle going on with him and the Hulk, and finally when he accepts it and he stops resisting.
And I've always thought that like he didn't feel like he fit in with everybody. Like he didn't want to be a part of the team because he didn't want to hurt anybody. He wasn't really like, did they really want him or did they really want Hulk?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and he was always like really embarrassed by the Hulk because the Hulk wasn't him. He couldn't really control what the Hulk did once he turned into the Hulk. Like to a certain extent he could over time, but like really like and you even get that in that one scene which is actually really funny when they travel to what is like the first Avengers film
oh yeah, New York, yeah.
in New York, and they're present day Avengers are sitting there watching the past Avengers, and like you see the Hulk just go through and just like unnecessarily like tear things apart.
Yeah.
And Bruce Banner's just standing there like, oh my god, I'm
Uh,
so embarrassed. And like that sums it up pretty well.
yeah, true. It does. Um,
But do you want to go back to the chat?
yeah, well, we'll talk a few things here. So, Captain Akron said, "Will all the Marvel movies be available on Disney Plus?" I believe so. I think they've said all Star Wars films, all Marvel films, and all Disney um, films, like animated films, will be available within the first year. Alma just said that too. Yeah, that they'll all be available within the first year. I'm not sure if that means that they'll take some off as they add some, or if at the end of year one you can sit down and watch all 22 of them in
Yeah,
total.
well, and like that's the thing is they did say like a lot of stuff's going to be added over time, so it might not be available like immediately, but
Yeah, and like, what will you um do with Spider-Man? Is Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home going to be able to go in there because they're technically Sony films? That's where it gets a little tricky. So I think that they want to work out the licensing agreements with a lot of people that things are up in the air. So get that out of the way.
all right. So we just got one more character that we're really definitely going to cover, and that is Thor.
Okay, so Thor. First of all, the first two Thor movies, Thor and Thor: Dark World, I always thought trash.
Yeah, they
And
had their
they're not
moments.
they're not bad movies, but they're not my favorite movies. The one thing is, Taika Waititi changed that character. He took one moment from the first Thor movie and completely expanded upon it, which is him drinking coffee and being super ignorant to like anything else in life. Like, he is bigger, he's a god, he's better
Yeah.
than everyone, so he doesn't need to like obey by the rules of anyone else in life. And
Like
that's just like,
completely unapologetically
yeah,
ignorant too.
and that's like what, but he's like like he's so honest in his ignorance, right?
yeah.
But like um that's what I love about him now. And like, from Ragnarok on, Thor has become one of the best characters, best and most well-rounded characters, right? Because he's so, in Thor and Thor: Dark World, he's so like stoic and just like bland and blah. Like, so many people love Loki because Loki is so much more interesting than Thor is. But now Thor, I feel like, has gone past him. And in this movie, we see Fat Thor, which really hit home for me hard. I was like, I need to lose some weight. But but I love the fact that they kept him fat the entire movie. Well, except for like the first 10 minutes of this movie. But I love that, like, the reason why he's fat is because he believes it's his fault.
Mm-hmm.
He had the opportunity to never have any of this happen, and it lies solely on him. And because of that, he's just gone into this binge drinking, like, Fortnite playing, doesn't care about anything else in the world except for him and Korg and the Wi-Fi. And it's so funny, but it's so nice to see him kind of like gain back a bit of his like charm and still be like completely ignorant in it.
Right.
But like, it is so good to see this character like grow from what he has from the first few films, because he's the character that I think has had the most change and the most growth from film to film. And I think that's also Chris Hemsworth wanting to be different in every film and wanting to bring something new to the character in every film. And so many people being like, "Oh, okay, you think I'm the handsomest man in like the Marvel movies? I'm gonna be the grossest man in the Marvel movies now."
Well, what's in first of all, I don't think he was gross, but
I mean, he basically had dreadlocks, so you know that he literally smells.
He like didn't wash his hair.
And he drinks day and night. By the way, we're not sponsored by anything, but he drinks day and night. Yeah, he drinks day and night, and so you know that he smells awful.
Yeah, well, okay, so first of all, second I saw him, I was like, that's the dude from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
Second of all, so we talk about Tony, we talk about Rocket, we talk about Doctor Strange, and the thing that kind of like unites them all is that they're like cocky and sarcastic, and they have a lot of confidence. But here's the thing. They have moments of weakness where they do doubt themselves. Thor doesn't doubt himself. Thor is like always confident. And maybe there's a moment from a film that he wasn't confident in that like I'm just not remembering. But like Thor is always confident in himself.
Not in this movie though.
He has lost all confidence in himself. This is like the first time, and like look at what that's done to him. Everyone in this film is suffering PTSD, and like it's being shown in different ways, and I just like I love how they show it on him, but then I also love that like in that moment where he does go back in time and he's on Asgard again, and he gets to see his mom, he gets to say goodbye to his mom, which is amazing. It's another reason I cried. Um, but like that moment where he like wants to see if he's still worthy of the hammer, and then he gets it, and he like breathes a sigh of relief, and he's like, "I'm still worthy."
So worthy.
Like he really thought he wasn't.
The great thing about that, though, too, and this is again great on the writing team for putting this film together, is that you have to explain to people who have not seen all of these movies
Or who forget maybe
or
like
who
some of
forget
them.
why things work the way they work. So like when Steve Rogers finally, like, you see the hammer like hit Thanos, and then it like comes back and it goes to Captain America. And everybody in our theater, that
Oh,
was
I
like
heard people stand up like behind us. Like I heard boom, and then they were like, "Wah!"
that was like the
Yeah,
biggest cheer in the whole theater.
yeah,
And it's because if you've watched all the movies, you know the payoff in the fact that you need to be worthy of having that hammer. But if you've never seen any of these other movies except for Infinity War and this film, which I know actually quite a few people that I talked to today and the last few days, that they've not seen any of these films except for Infinity War and like maybe one or two others that they I think a lot of people said they'd seen like Guardians and they'd seen like Black Panther. But like the writing team and the Russo brothers had to like make sure that even if you didn't know why it was amazing that Captain America was picking up that hammer, that they had to give you at least a little bit of explanation. And so in that moment when he says still worthy, it gives the nod to say you have to be worthy to be able to
right,
wield this hammer.
right.
And so fans for a long time and fans for like just now could all pick up on almost everything in this film.
Mm-hmm. So are there any other characters that you just want to talk about at all?
Um, I mean, we've talked about some of them. We talked about Spider-Man, and we know that a new Doctor Strange movie is going to be coming. So we'll get more of him in time, and we'll probably get more Black Panther. That's been announced. Um, I would like to see more Falcon and Winter Soldier and what's going to happen with that. So I'm excited. I wasn't excited for the show. Now I'm excited about it.
Right.
Um,
So, and
yeah,
at the end, we do see Captain America passes on his shield to um, to Falcon, and
Mhm.
not to Bucky like it happens in the comics.
It gives there's both, so it could have gone either way.
Yeah, well, they're both, and Falcon and Bucky are together,
Right.
so like it's assumed that them
They
together
can
are kind
both
of like,
be.
yeah, or at least like they're both going to carry on his legacy. Um, Rocket, I first of all, I have a video coming out this Tuesday, Marvel 101 on Rocket. One of my favorite moments in this film, and this is something you actually had pointed out to me, and I was like really like, I was really proud of you for thinking this. You were like, wasn't that amazing that like when Thanos started firing on everyone, Rocket just like jumped on top of Groot to protect him. And I was like, oh my god, like, yes. Like, he's like, I can't lose you again. I just thought that was so amazing. And I think the reason I think that's so amazing is because of the character development of Rocket. And that's something I want to get to in Marvel 101, so I'm not going to like talk about too much here. But like he's another character that's gone through a lot of change. When he first starts out in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, he's very cold. He's very like I don't want to say selfish, but like he's more worried about like survival and self-preservation more than anything else. And now he's jumping on top of someone else to save them. Like
Right.
that's not the same Rocket that you get in the beginning of Guardians 1. And I also think it's really awesome. The Guardians films, any of you have watched us for a long time or listened to our podcast or anything like that, like you know the Guardians franchise
That's
is
your thing.
like yeah, like I would take Guardians, like, if you just, like, took away the rest of the MCU films and just gave me Guardians, like, I would still be happy. Um, sorry. But, like, I'm actually really excited now to see Thor. I think
Like
we're
Thor
gonna
with the
I
Guardians,
think
or just Thor?
Thor with the Guardians. I think Thor is gonna be in Guardians 3.
Oh, totally. And Guardians 3 is presumably the search for Gamora,
Right.
and the search for the the Soul Stone,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well,
Which
yeah, because like it seems like she could have went somewhere else instead of actually dying. Which does that mean if they find her that they find
Black Widow,
Black Widow?
which in that case they're having the standalone Black Widow film, so then it would mean that it's not a prequel; it is still a sequel. Um, so that's possible too.
Yeah. So I guess like we're kind of getting into speculation now.
Yeah. So Jennifer said, how can this be the end? How can Spider-Man Far From Home be the end of Phase 3 when we're still have all these other films? So like Phase 1, the difference between Phase 1, 2, and 3 was that Phase 1 kind of ended with the first Avengers film. Not necessarily, but kind of. And then the second phase ends with Ultron, and by the end of Phase 2, we've introduced a ton more characters. By the end of Phase 3, we've introduced a ton more characters, and it ends with the Infinity War slash Endgame. Um, so we've killed off some characters, but like all these characters can continue on. But you have to assume that Phase 4 will end with some big, spectacle that brings all the characters together again. If you're a comic book fan, everything is a periodical, right? So like you have all these different characters um in their own like little stories, their own like little comic books, but then like once a year you would have one comic book or one graphic novel or whatever, one story that would bring everybody together, and that was kind of like how you fused all the stories together in some way or the other, and that's kind of how they're treating all of the different phases. So you can still like the characters can keep going and doing their own thing. It's more or less how you're going to bring them together in Phase 4.
Hmm.
I don't think they can make a more epic film at the end of Phase 4 if they bring everybody together. I think they're going to have to do something like they did here, where it's going to take multiple phases to build toward
Mm.
something even bigger. Like you can have what like Age of Ultron kind of was. It was like a fun little film where everybody came together, but it wasn't like epic like this was epic.
Yeah, I'd like to see what they do moving forward as far as villains are concerned. I think that's like one of the biggest complaints that people have about the Marvel films, besides like a few exceptions and exceptional exceptions.
Yeah.
Um, that the villains just aren't like as interesting of characters, or as like developed as characters as people really want. I mean, they like
We've
have
we've done better recently.
yeah. So I do wonder if like that's maybe more of like the direction that they would go in is like making the not necessarily like not that I'm not saying like that they would make like a villain focused film. Like it would still always be focused on like the hero. Like the hero is always going to be like the title character.
Sure.
Like it's not gonna be like Suicide Squad, like uh or maybe I don't know, maybe it
Maybe it
is.
could be. DC has always been way better at villains though than Marvel has. There are some good ones that are out there, like sure, but I don't mind that. Like to me, and what was interesting about this film, right, was that like they killed Thanos in the first like 10 minutes, basically to say that this movie really isn't about a villain. This movie isn't about Thanos. This is about getting our heroes back, and like that's so interesting because like that's what I've always loved about these films. Like you could send me off into space with the Guardians at any point doing anything. I
Yeah.
don't even care. It's those small intimate conversations. It's those little moments of jabbing back and forth at each other. It's those like cool little actiony sequences. Like when Rocket and Yondu are like escaping and they
Yeah.
taking out everybody and like they're slow motion walking and like it's so cool. Like it's not about like getting to whoever the big boss is. it's about taking these characters and like seeing them live out their lives and making the choices they make, and like that's what's so interesting about these films. These aren't action films. They're stories about people that just so happen to have superpowers or billionaires or whatever, and that they've sworn to protect the universe no matter the cost.
Right. Like if you had powers, what would you do with them?
Yeah, and that's what they've chosen here. So like with the X-Men, they've chosen that these are mutants, and that there's the fight between mutants, and then there's like this group of humans who say mutants are bad, and so they're trying to get rid of all the mutants. And it's like this three-way war slash dance. But that's not what this is about. This is just about people who want to take what they have, their abilities, their money, their technology, their brain, whatever it is, and do something good with it. And I think that's like it's something that maybe Disney brought to the table, because right, like Iron Man isn't necessarily that way in the beginning, or Thor, or whatever. Like the first few films, the original Incredible Hulk, maybe that's Disney's influence, but I love that Disney influence there, um, because it gives the morality to these characters that you don't get with like Batman. He doesn't care. He like, I mean, he sort of cares, but like if he killed someone, he'd be like, it was in the name of the law. I'm fighting crime, whatever. And that was actually a huge like problem in the last couple of months. People were speculating, uh, would Batman kill someone, because a lot of the writers and the directors from the DC universe said yes, he would. And I think a lot of fans enjoy the Marvel side of it and saying like, there needs to be a sense of morality with my heroes.
Right. And they question that too in Civil War.
Yeah.
So let's talk about like some of our best or our favorite moments from Endgame. And I'd like to hear your favorite moments in the chat too.
Yeah,
while we're talking.
yeah, jump in with your favorite moments. Korg asking Thor to yell at a kid on Fortnite was amazing, because like he's this god, right? He could do like so many things, and yet um, he's yelling at children on a headset about a video game. And Korg is like, "Thank you," like he's like thanking his dad, which was great. Um, Christian brought it up, and you brought it up earlier too. The conversation between Thor and his mom. I didn't cry. I know a lot of people did. I can hear the sniffles. And her at the very end, like they have such this sweet, wonderful moment, but it's such a mom thing to end that conversation by her being like, "And could you just like eat a salad?"
Yeah.
Like it was such like a mom thing where it's just like, "Thanks for having this wonderful conversation with me, mom." Oh, you ruined it.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. It's such a mom thing to do.
So I loved, yeah, and I know you love this too, the references to time travel and how this film actually made up new rules for time travel, specifically that like
Oh, but it was so Back to the Future. There were so many Back to the Future moments.
Yeah.
Which I love. Like for those of you who don't know, I love Back to the Future. So this is like
Right.
right up my alley.
But I love, okay, so like, so one of the things about the Marvel films, and maybe I'm getting like real nerdy and like philosophical or something.
No, you are.
Here.
That's fine.
I love when art and like art in this form too, comic books and film are kind of like explaining what the future of science actually is, and they kind of get it right. Because I think like a lot of the stuff with like the quantum realm and like quantum physics and stuff like that, like all this like new stuff is being discovered and like found out about like the world that we live in, and things aren't like quite as we always maybe thought that they were with science. And I think this film kind of is like hitting on something really special, like the way that we think time works.
Sure.
And like thinking that like the past still exists, but it doesn't actually still exist. Like the only thing that really matters is now. And then like when they travel back in time, it doesn't affect now because now is the past
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
past
To
that
that.
you're traveling.
You can't impact the past. You can only impact the future.
Right. But not like the future that is your present.
Right.
And like I love that they like were just like, let's change the rules of time travel as we know it.
And in fact, it was kind of cool because, like, you get that explanation from Hulk, right? But then, if you were unclear about that, because he's kind of like the present is the past, the past, the past, and it's just like, well, you can't just say a sentence like that. Like you were trying to tell me in the car the other day, you're like, this is how it works. The future is the past, the past is the past, the past, and I was like, I'm driving, trying to focus on the road. I can't understand this. But you get you get this conversation with the Ancient One, which, by the way, glad to see Tilda Swinton back. Her character is fantastic,
Yeah.
and she, like literally draws out this line and like shows, like, here's what you're doing. You're creating.
Yeah, that was cool.
You're creating multiple timelines. So you, like, to be able to fix this, you need to bring all the Infinity Stones back so that you can pretty much like erase what you added to the timeline. And so that's kind of nice that like you get Steve Rogers at the end having to do that. Which, by the way, I know that, and this is what makes me sad because like Chris Evans said he doesn't want to do it anymore, and like he can come back, and they have talked about him maybe coming back and doing cameos as like old Captain America.
Yeah.
But like, wouldn't it be so cool if one of the Disney Plus shows was like Steve Rogers, like time hero, and you just saw him like from show to show returning the stones, and it was like, because I think they've said like all these Disney Plus Marvel shows will be like 6 to 8 episodes.
Oh yeah.
So wouldn't it be cool to
That would
see
actually
how
be
he
pretty
goes
cool.
from the time machine that they build to Peggy Carter?
Yeah.
And like what that was like,
Yeah.
and him going in all these different places. That'd be so cool. I would enjoy that.
So, you brought up the Ancient One scene. I love that scene. Okay, so my 3 favorite Marvel characters are Rocket Raccoon, Doctor Strange, and Scarlet Witch. So I love this like I love like I don't just love Doctor Strange. I love the movie Doctor Strange because of like all of like the astral plane and like different dimensions and planes of existence and all that stuff. And that scene where she just like knocks the Hulk into the astral plane.
Oh yeah, it was cool. It was
That
like it was a nod back to it.
Yeah, and then
And it was cool because it was just Mark Ruffalo. Like it wasn't it wasn't the merged of it. It was like, because the spirit, like the body is its own thing, but the spirit is simply just this man.
Right. It's he is the one that's inside.
Yeah.
And I also love that scene because it's just one of those like really nerdy, like inspiring moments that like makes you like tear up a little bit because you're like, oh, I love the nerdiness of this. Like um when he tells her that like Strange actually gave up the stone, the time stone, and she's like, he gave it up.
Yeah, there's a purpose to this.
Yeah, and she was like, Strange is the best of us. I was just like, chills. And then like when she said she knew like that right now he's like still a surgeon doing something, like the fact that they just gave that little nod that like she knew of him this whole time, even though like in the movie Doctor Strange when she first meets him, she treats him like really poorly. She doesn't like welcome him in because he has to like earn and he has to learn on his own. Because it's just like Doctor Strange says to Tony Stark at the end, where Tony Stark is like, is this like, because Doctor Strange says like, out of like whatever like outcomes, this there's only one where you survive, and Tony Stark is like, is this the one? And he's like, if I tell you, it won't happen.
Right.
It's like that same idea. It's like
you won't become
the Ancient One couldn't like open up to him at the beginning of Doctor Strange, even though she knew who he was all along, because then it wouldn't happen. I loved that.
And it also shows that, because like, when we first meet her in Doctor Strange, she is not in New York City. And so this shows that like, that these characters, the Ancient One and all of the other people studying the arts, they are protecting the world. They are going all around, and so she's part of the fight in New York in the first Avengers. You just never see her, and so it's like you're connecting all these characters, and like yes, they weren't considered Avengers at that point, but they are still fighting for the greater good.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
I also really loved the scene where Scarlet Witch shows up and she's all like glowing eyes, and Thanos is like, I don't even know who you are, and she's like, oh, you will, and
Yeah.
she just like destroys things. I mean, I said she's like one of my favorite characters, so I just like, it's like you know like her powers come from her emotions, and it's like you can almost like feel the emotions when you see her, just like with Thor when like he has Stormbreaker and his eyes glow. It's like you know that somehow that power is coming from like within and like from these like really intense emotions, and like during those moments you like almost feel it. Um another scene that was one of my favorites, which is a little less inspiring, um, was when War Machine and Nebula were going to get the stone that you see
Mm.
in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like waiting for Peter Quill to show up, or like he does show up, and they're kind of like watching him from afar, and they're playing the song that he like dances to at the very beginning
Yeah.
of Guardians 1, but you like get it from their perspective. So he has like the Walkman on, so you like can't hear the music, but you like see him dancing and like singing to it like really off key. I love that moment. And I think like them going back in time was really awesome. And we were watching Kevin Smith earlier. He did a full review or
It's like
recap,
an hour and 15 minutes. It's ridiculous.
yeah, of the film, and he talks about this like that like every moment they go back in time to are moments that we've seen before.
Yeah.
um
For the most part, I mean, like when we go back to the 70s, they're not, but
sure, but like I guess like other than that, like all the moments that you get are like things that you understand, and it's
yeah,
like it's really good for like the fans, like it's paying
right.
service to the fans.
Yeah, because we're not familiar with the 1970s per se, but we are familiar with the location
Right.
because we've been there.
And last but not least, one of my favorite moments is when Tony Stark's saying goodnight to his kid, and he says he loves I love you a ton, and she's like I love you 3,000, and then he goes to Pepper and he's like, not that this is a contest or anything,
Right.
but she loves me 3,000, and you're like in the 600 to 900 range or like something like that. Which, by the way, totally making a T-shirt about that. Trying to wait until the spoilers are like acceptable to put out there in the world, but
Right.
totally got to make a T-shirt on that. But did you want to get into the stuff that we know is next?
Yeah,
We
so
have
we've got Doctor Strange 2, Black Panther 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. We have Spider-Man, which is coming out in just a few months, Far From Home. And we know that there's going to be a Black Widow film,
Yep,
right?
and then we have all the Disney Plus shows.
Right. So we've got WandaVision, which Jennifer said possibly take place in the 50s, which would be interesting to see how that plays out. We get Falcon and Winter Soldier, which will essentially probably be a buddy show, maybe about who's the better Captain America or something like that. You know, like, and then we're gonna get Loki, which we didn't even talk about, but Loki. I'm thinking they'll use Loki and the Tesseract in like this kind of weird alternate timeline that they've now created with it.
I have
Um,
to say, I love that scene though. Like when they go back and like he's got the thing over his mouth so he can't say anything, and
and
he's
it's
like
just like
under
it's all in
arrest,
his eyes.
and he's like, yeah, and he like sees like Ant-Man like kick the briefcase, and he's just like,
Yeah,
like this is
it's
awesome.
good. It's
This is awesome.
like I actually don't think Loki. Like Tom Hiddleston doesn't say a single line in this film, right? Because like you see him in when they go back to Asgard in Dark World, he's like there just like laying on his bed or whatever, and then you see him in this,
Yeah,
but he doesn't say a single line in this
he
entire
does
film.
it. That's funny.
No, but I would assume we're gonna get the Loki alternate timeline Tesseract um, show, and again, all these shows are supposed to be like 6 to 8 episodes long, which is just fine enough because then you can get these characters' stories and still move them along without giving them a
Yeah,
whole movie. And then we have Guardians 3.
which I
I guess
am
that
the
movie's kind of
most excited
you're the
for.
most excited for that. I'm actually really excited for Far From Home. I'm excited to kind of wrap up little things and whatnot, and
Yeah.
get back to Ned and Flash and MJ and all these kind of like characters because like I loved Homecoming. I thought it had one of the best scenes in the entire MCU
Mm-hmm.
in the car scene. And then we have what's the other show that we have? We have WandaVision, Loki, oh, and Hawkeye.
Mm.
We haven't really said what the Hawkeye show is going to be. I hope it's more Ronin stuff. It probably won't be now that he's like cool with life. It could be possibly just like him training his daughter to take his mantle, which could
Yeah.
set up the Young Avengers in the long run.
Yeah, I think something like that would be cool. I don't like that other idea. I just feel like that's too dark and too.
Probably so. It's too Daredevil-y. It's too Netflix Marvel.
Yeah, yeah, it's too net. Like we didn't watch the oh my god, what's it called? The other
Punisher, the Punisher,
no, the other one.
Daredevil 3,
No.
Luke Cage,
The guy that was in Japan.
the guy that was in Japan, Iron Fist.
Yeah,
Oh,
we didn't
okay.
watch that, but I feel like that sounds like Iron Fist.
Sort of.
But I didn't watch Iron Fist, so I don't really know.
Yeah, I would say that Ronin is probably more Batman-y than anything.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd really care for that as much as because it just doesn't seem like it has any heart to it. And the Marvel stories that do the best are the ones that have the heart. So
Sure.
I'd like to see more like what you said, like he's like training his daughter, or maybe it's even like somehow like his backstory.
Right. Possibly so. Yeah, how he becomes
Yeah.
Hawkeye, because he's just a dude with a bow and arrow. That's the thing. They've made fun of him this entire time. He's made fun of himself the entire time because
Yeah.
like he has no superpowers. He's just a guy that's really good at archery.
But isn't that like almost like more impressive that he can like do everything he
Yeah,
does?
I've loved Hawkeye the whole time. In fact, like
Yeah, Hawkeye's always been one of
there
my
used
favorites.
so I used to go to Red Robin like when I was a kid with my family,
I don't know where this is going.
and they used to have a couple of arcade games.
Oh,
And one
okay.
of the arcade games was like a X-Men Avengers arcade game, and you could choose what character you wanted to be. And I always chose Hawkeye. And I didn't read any comics. I didn't know anything about any of these characters, but I just liked that he had a bow and arrow. And so as a kid, I actually really liked Hawkeye. And when the movies kind of brought him in, I was just like, yes, Hawkeye. And even like they've made fun of him the whole time. He's made fun of himself the whole time. And I've always kind of felt a little Hawkeye-ish because of that. I'm like, no one really wants me on the team, but I'm just kind of on the team. I'm really good at what I do, but like, I should not be saving the world in that way.
What did you think of the Mohawk?
Oh, everybody was like making fun of the Mohawk. If I could pull off that
Mohawk
hairdo,
was freaking
I would pull it off.
incredible.
That's great. I would love that. Yeah.
Let us know in the chat. Mohawk or no Mohawk?
I'm Passing Fancy says that we are a perfect combination of perfect and cute, which is
Thanks.
she is. I'm not. I'm Fat Thor.
No, you're not.
But I'm like 3 months away from having a long, gross beard and dreadlocks.
No!
Get ready. Fat Thor is coming. I don't know, like, what are you most excited about, like, for films? Well, you know, Guardians, but what are you most excited about for, like, the TV shows?
I mean, I don't know if I'm like I don't know what this WandaVision thing is gonna be, but I want more Scarlet Witch. I feel like there's so many like opportunities to like explore these characters and like Scarlet Witch in the comics, she has like so many different stories, so many different like she's got like okay, so in the comics there's actually like this whole it's different, her like origin story is different, but like there's witches and there's this like whole world of witches and stuff, so I'm interested in like seeing if maybe she like discovers like her people even.
Could, yeah.
But I'd love to see like her and Vision together more. Like
yeah, like the moments that you get in
yeah.
other films, you're like, I just wish you could just I wish you guys could just love each other.
Yeah. But like also like and not to say that like I love watching people being broken, but those are like the most interesting characters are the ones that are just like super depressed and broken.
Yeah.
And like I want to see more of that.
Well, that's one of the most interesting things about Infinity War is that moment when she like has to kill Vision.
Yeah.
right? And
And she's like, no.
it's one of the most powerful scenes in that film or in any of the MCU because it's like we've never seen a love like this. Like two people who just like want to be in love and they just want to be together, but like there's so many things trying to tear them apart. And finally, like at the very, very end, they have to tear each other apart.
Mm-hmm.
And like she has to be the one that kills him, and like it's what makes her more of like an angry rage monster. Um, I just love that. I love like this kind of like two people that can't necessarily be together. So I would like to see them together, but I also kind of don't.
I want to see like what else they can do.
Jennifer said if they go back to the 50s, she could be with Butler Jarvis. So
she's
you know,
like, maybe there'll be this like love triangle.
I
She's
need
like, I don't
someone.
know why I love you.
I need someone with this voice. I am attracted to this voice. Even though my accent is gone,
yeah,
I need an accent in my life.
I'm so glad they got rid of that accent.
Oh, that accent was awful.
I wish they would have just like somehow done that from day one, but like.
You're from Eastern Europe? Yeah, but I just talk like this because
Yeah.
I can't pull that.
It's superpowers.
Yeah, it's superpowers.
That's how you explain it.
But that's all I've got to say about this film. We've talked for like an hour and a half now. This is like the longest live show that we've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say. Like, I could just say so much more. Like, we could just talk about the whole movie. We could just talk for 3 hours.
I don't want to do that though. Okay, so I was hoping that this show would end when Game of Thrones would come on because we still want to watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so
we're still gonna watch Game of Thrones. So I'm sorry to those people who were like, I'm gonna stick it out and listen to what these guys say, and then watch Game of Thrones. And now you've been torn. You're like, do I turn it off? Do I just watch Game of Thrones? And some of you, clearly, I could see how many people are watching. Clearly, some people turned us off because they were like, no,
yeah,
I need to see who dies and more death in my geeky stories.
Who is going to watch Game of Thrones, and who do you think is gonna win?
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for watching and hanging out with us for so long and chatting all this stuff. Talking about Secret Invasion, Secret Wars, House of M. So many possibilities coming up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Clearly, they're not finishing, and they're not even close to done introducing characters and killing off characters and whatnot. I hope that nobody dies for a long time. I feel like we got enough deaths. I don't want to see Scarlet Witch come back, and I kind of don't want to see current day Gamora come back. I want to see them.
Black Widow, you mean?
Oh yeah, sorry.
It's because Scarlett
Johansson.
They really messed that one up.
You've done this to me. You've trained me into this. I don't want to see like current day Gamora come back. I want to see like alternate timeline Gamora just join up with the Guardians of the Galaxy.
I don't know what they're gonna do, but I trust them. Also, prediction for Guardians 3, the theme of it is gonna be about forgiving people for things that they said on Twitter in the past.
Who's also, can we please, the Collector's dead, so that's fine, but can we please get Jeff Goldblum back?
You think in Guardians 3?
Maybe.
Maybe, because like Thor might have to. He might know like something. Like he might be like, "Oh, I know that this thing is."
And he knows where that planet is.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta go back to that junk planet. Gotta get some Jeff Goldblum up in here.
It could happen.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Hashtag #1901. Keep moving, people. Yeah. And Jon Snow's dead. No, he's not dead. He's not gonna be dead. Anyways, so
Jon Snow, I think is gonna win. And Daenerys. And Jon Snow together.
Forever. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. And make sure to subscribe. Like, you've seen like the graphics for the whole show. You can go to network1901.com. We've got a shop there. Patreon.com/network1901.
And I'll have that I Love You 3000 shirt soon.
We're gonna make a shirt. We've got a bunch of different shirts. Tons of Star Wars shirts actually. So if you're into Star Wars stuff, lots of those. And we're gonna have some more Marvel stuff and some other stuff coming up. So yeah. In the meantime, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And keep on moving, people.
Hurry back.
Look for a new video on Tuesday.
Yeah, Rocket Raccoon.
Woo.